We're glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So friends, we are so glad that all of you are here this morning, and I hope that we can see in the chat and see where everyone's from. It's so great to be gathered together this morning. My name is Leah Warren, and I'm the Director of Children's Ministries at Hickson United Methodist Church in Chattanooga, and I also serve on the Holston Children's Ministry team. And so as we come this morning to talk about whether or not we have Vacation Bible School, and we hope this tool is also a tool that will be helpful as we begin to look and brainstorm about what it would look like to begin to reopen on-site children's ministries when that time comes. I really believe that the church is still meeting. We have, right now we have left the building, but the church is the people. And so, but one day a time will come that we are able to gather on site again. And so as we're looking this morning at Vacation Bible School, and then also probably using most of this resource as an awesome resource for whether or not, what does it look like when we do regather with children's ministries. And I believe this will be a wonderful resource for that. But before we get started, I know that most of us probably came from busy mornings or different things going on. And I would just encourage us to lay aside those things for a moment, for a few minutes, just to be able to focus here. And also I would encourage you to just to remember that peace of Christ that is here with us, that he meets us in these moments, in these times. And also I would encourage you to think about what do you want to get out of this morning? What is your question that you are asking, or what do you want to get out of this morning? And as we pray, I just pray that you will be able to release those things that may be swirling around us, or the chaos that we're feeling this morning, and just rest in the peace of Christ this morning. And then also to give God those questions because he wants to hear from us. So I'm going to pray, and then I'm going to challenge, and then I'm going to turn it over to Miss SusanGroseclose, and so glad that she's going to be sharing with us this morning. So friends, let's pray. Dear God, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for all the many blessings you give us, Lord. I thank you so much for this, for these children's ministers, these pastors, these volunteers, Father, these ministry team members that are on Zoom this morning, Lord Jesus. Father, you know where each one of us is at, Lord Jesus. You also know, Father, what may be swirling around us this morning, or the thing that we didn't get to that we want to. And Lord, I just pray right now that we can just lay those down at your feet, Father, that we can just be fully present, Father. As we breathe in, we can breathe in your love and your goodness, your grace, your peace, and your mercy. And Father, that we can breathe out anything that may be weighing us down, or maybe causing a heaviness on us this morning, that we can just give those to you, Lord Jesus. And Father, I just pause for a moment, Lord, and I just pray that each one of us in the stillness of our heart can say those questions that we are asking, those ponderings we may be having, Lord Jesus, and that we can give those to you just in the stillness of this moment.
Thanks, Malia.
You're welcome.
I am going to try to share my screen. I sent it to you too, Malia, just in case. We're trying new technology. Am I good, or no?
Yes, I see it, Miss Susan.
Okay. Start slideshow. Okay, I keep talking and figure out technology at the same time, but we are delighted you are here. And as Malia said, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat box, and we will have time at the end to go through it. Malia is hosting and co-hosting. We're doing this together, so she can kind of watch the chat box and help with come up. Yes.
Susan, I just got the PowerPoint. It did come through this time. So if you want me to manage it, I'll be glad to. So I can share my screen instead of you having to do both, if that would be helpful to you.
I think I can manage it.
Okay.
If I need to, I'll let you know. You
Okay.
watch the chat. But we are delighted that you were online. As it said in the publicity, we're going to be talking specifically about Vacation Bible School and what that might look like. But it also gives you some things to think about as far as any summer or fall programming as we think about relaunching our ministries back in the church building. As Malia said, we haven't left the church. We've been the church all along, and we just may be returning to the building. And if you've been shopping or going out, you know that every industry has been changing. And so this gives us some ways to think about how to begin changing and being safe for everyone. The first mandate we have said is that if there is no worship gathering, there's no programming. That's the way we have been functioning and operating since day one. There is a caveat to that. I did learn yesterday that even though our bishop has put out that there is no worship, no programming, there has been concern about parents headed back to work and required to go back to work and not having childcare. And so there have been churches raising questions about our church-related weekday programs. If you have a weekday program, some of this will help think through that, but the bishop and cabinet are in conversation about how or if, or I don't know what that answer is going to be yet, to open up weekday childcare programs before we come back to worship gatherings. So just be on the lookout for that. If I do not have you on the child network, email, if you've not been getting emails from me, you may want to drop your name and email address in the chat box and we can add you to the network, and I will update you as soon as I know what those guidelines that the cabinet is putting out in regards to church-related weekday program. And I would check with your state to see what child licensing requirements are, because my hunch is they will have a whole nother set of licensing requirements for childcare that I have not researched yet or put on this PowerPoint. So we may need to do something just related to church weekday at a later point. We have said, and the bishop, the cabinet believe in what we say in scripture, that we shall love the Lord our God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength, and we shall love one another. And part of our health and safety is that's the primary point, is being sure that everyone stays healthy and safe, and we don't create a situation where we might create illness for another person. We also, as followers of John Wesley, say that we are to do no harm. That is one of our general rules. So paramount in our thinking on the cabinet level, as well as church leaders, is what are we doing to keep ourselves healthy and safe, but also what are we doing in our churches to keep health and safety. If and when, well, whenever we open back up, that will be paramount, and your government, your local officials will also have recommendations if somebody tests positive in your congregation. And it may be that your congregation closes down at that point, just to keep everybody else healthy and safe. We are recommending that you do not start back with children's programming immediately. In fact, everything I have read has said not even to open your nursery the first Sunday back. I think it's just that there are going to be some changes. There is no way that we can go back to what it was back in March, the last time we gathered. It is going to be different. We'll have a whole set of different guidelines and recommendations for churches. So we suggest, and particularly for Vacation Bible School, because you need that lead time to do any planning for VBS, that you think back to whatever that start date will be, that moving forward, we need to not have any Vacation Bible School or any kind of really programming for 4 to 6 weeks. I say have a plan in place, put it in your back pocket, put it on a tablet, whatever, but then be flexible with it. We don't know the date. We kind of have a plan, but we don't know yet the date. Be flexible with the number of days that you do it. Be flexible with how long you do it. If you're used to a half a day, you may shorten it to only a day or two, an hour or two, hour and a half. If you are used to doing 5 days, you may shorten it to 3 days. And it may be a weekend event. Be flexible with the timing. If you're looking at 4 to 6 weeks, we are sitting here almost the middle of May. We know our churches aren't going to go back until sometime in June, if at that, because our brothers and sisters in the Virginia Conference are in a shelter in place until June the 10th. So I have no sense that our cabinet is going to issue any kind of relaunch before June the 10th. I don't know that for sure and for certain. I'm not putting that out there. I'm just saying that's my best guess. And so you're looking at the middle of July, end of July, and also realize that school systems are now talking about going back earlier than later to get a head start for the time that they missed, as well as if there's a second wave that comes up in the fall. So need to be flexible in thinking about what your plan might be. We are in the midst of a major paradigm shift. Mm-hmm. What has been is no longer what it is or what it will be right now, particularly until we get a vaccine and or treatment. So we are in definitely a paradigm shift. But the reality of that is, in paradigm shifts, you also have the opportunity for creativity. Mm-hmm. And so let's be creative. Let's let God speak to us and think to us in new and fresh ways. I would suggest that you think small, not big, and you think simple, not complex. Teamwork improves safety. You need to be talking with your pastor, your congregational leaders. You need to be talking with your children's ministry team. If you don't have a children's ministry team, this is the ideal time to put one together, made up of parents. And I would, particularly in this time, add any medical professionals that you have in your congregation, particularly those in the pediatric field. I would talk with those and add a trustee representative on your committee. I think teamwork is it. I can't think of all the things, and I will say that I probably have left something out on this PowerPoint. So be willing to ask a lot of people, talk to a lot of people, government officials, read what's going on in your own local community. So teamwork is extremely important, and you need to stay in touch with your pastor and your other staff, because what I have presented is really just thinking along the eyes of children's ministry, and there will be a lot of other things that are implemented within your entire congregation. So you need to make sure that whatever you're planning coordinates with the entire congregation, and the protocols and the safety measures that are being put in place across the way. And some of that will get played out, and you won't even have to think of it. You'll be told that this is the way we operate, but it's important for you to know what those are. You need to make sure that you're staying up to date on CDC guidelines. That changes every single day. It was not till just fairly recently that we started wearing masks. That was not even a part of the guideline, but it is now. So make sure that you are paying attention to the official information, not just there's an awful lot of information and speculation out there. So pay attention to your CDC. I would also pay attention to your state and your local government guidelines, as well as guidelines that our own bishop and cabinet put out. We'll be getting more information, and why I'm making this presentation today, you may look back on this, we all may look back on this in 2 to 3 weeks, and a lot of it will be obsolete or has been changed or added to. So this is my best understanding as it is today. As you think about the health and safety of your children and parents and workers, staff, consider 3 areas. The people that you work with. That's children, that's families, that's staff, that's volunteers. Think about the places in your congregation, in your church building. Where are the places that children gather? Whether that be for Vacation Bible School or any other programming. But think through all of the rooms, the spaces and places that are used, and think about what supplies you have available or can make available or will ask families to bring. We're going to go through each of these individually. So let's talk about people in general.
Susan,
First and foremost, you want to talk about and think about the health precautions. What are you going to do for health check? I have been some places, and it requires me to have a temperature check. I've been other places and they don't do that. I've been places where you do a questionnaire about the status of your health. Other places don't do that. So what is required for health check? And some employees are requiring it of their employees and their staff, but not requiring it of customers. So talk through with what the health check's going to look like. Face mask, that is becoming more and more prevalent. It used to be we didn't have to wear face masks, but everything I'm seeing and CDC puts out that everybody needs to be wearing a face mask. I went on last night to double check. CDC says any child 2 years and up needs to have a face mask. Hand washing, hand sanitizing stations. How are you going to think through how do you help children with washing hands? Where do you need to put hand sanitizing stations, or are you going to ask children and families to bring their own hand sanitizer and put it in their pocket? Are you going to make it available in every classroom? what does that look like? We are moving to a no contact society, a contactless society. If you've been to the grocery store, you know that there's plastic over the card readers, and the plexiglass is in place at the cashiers. The cashiers prefer not to handle cash or checks. So what are the things that you touch on a regular basis for Vacation Bible School? Or what would teachers be handing out? And is there a way to make it contactless? If you're using a ball, it's kind of hard to be, you have to contact that ball, but how are you going to sanitize the ball in between the groups that use it? But there may be other things that you use like books, or if you're using song sheets, you might project the songs up on the screen. Think through how can you reduce the physical contact. And of course, that means no hugging, no standing, well, that's social distancing, but it means really no hugging or hand holding. If you're used to gathering in a circle for prayer and holding hands, what do you do? If you're used to children lining up and holding hands, what do you do? A whole other area, I'm just going to throw out a lot of questions for you to think about. I don't necessarily have the answers. We can talk about that in our discussion after the presentation, but this is just to help you begin thinking through all the issues. Snacks is another one. How do you keep people safe with handing out snacks? The days of putting out a box of, or a tray of cookies, and you pick up your own cookie or snack and pour your own juice is not the safest way. You probably need them in individual bags and serve it that way with juice already poured, and everybody has their own cup. So think through all the health precautions that you're taking. When we think about children individually, you may want to think about limiting the size of your group. Right now, we are to only gather 10 or less. Probably when we start gathering as a congregation, it will mean that we can have 25 or less, maybe, and the next phase is 50 or less, and then we get to 100 and less. So you're going to need to be thinking about limiting your size. If you're thinking VBS, you may want to go to a morning or an afternoon session of VBS with different age groups just to limit the total number of children. You need to make sure it's manageable so that you have a way to think through how do we manage and we can keep the health precautions because it's a manageable size. Think about what you do in programming that's large group and small groups. Is there a way to make the large groups smaller groups? Do we need to make the small groups even smaller? As I said earlier, you may want to think about a shorter time frame, lessen the hours, lessen the number of days. And there are multiple alternative options. Actually, there are four major ways you could do VBS. And next week, at this same time, on May 14th, we're going to be looking at some of those multiple alternative ways of doing VBS. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time today, but thinking about VBS in the home, VBS in the neighborhood, VBS as we traditionally know it, or VBS in another setting. You may also think about, is VBS going to be done better in the fall, at fall break, or on a weekend, or a Wednesday night option? So think through what options you have for VBS. Thinking about your volunteers, there's some really key questions to consider. We all have traditional people that we can count on and know that they're going to be there no matter what. But are they going to be there this year? If you are dependent on a lot of persons 55, 60, 65 and above, they may not want to be ready to venture out and be around a group of children. You may have parents who might have volunteered in the past, but they may not want to volunteer this year because they don't want to risk the chance of taking the virus back home to their own families. So you need to really think through, are you going to have the volunteers that you need? And if not, can you get other volunteers? Or if not, what does that look like for your Vacation Bible School? Think through about what additional volunteers that you need. One right off the bat is who's going to go around the church building and using disinfectant wipe or disinfectant spray to spray down the doorknobs and all the touch places, that high touch places. Who's going to be cleaning the restrooms throughout your programming time? So do you need additional volunteers for that? Do you need more volunteers because you've got even smaller groups and thus more groups? And then think through seriously, how are you going to train volunteers in the health precautions that your church is taking? And there are a wide variety of people who agree or don't agree with precautions that are being taken. And if they volunteer, they're going to need to follow whatever precautions your congregation has put in place. So training is going to be key for that, even beyond just the additional training that we usually do. If we think about the places that we are, we need to think about our own sanitizing and disinfecting that we're doing in our congregations. You and your churches can be doing deep cleaning now. And that means really cleaning and sanitizing and disinfecting everything in the building. Particularly think about the classrooms that your children gather in. What furniture needs to be removed, and how do you sanitize and wash all the toys? And then you'll be working with your pastor and trustees about what sanitizing procedures are put in place within your congregation. How frequently? How are you going to sanitize before the children arrive, during the activities, as well as after? So I use the example of the ball. You're going to need to sanitize that ball that you play catch with before VBS. You probably will want to sanitize it after, at least at minimum, after every class use. But then how do you sanitize it at the end of the time? Is there more of a sanitation process? So walk through your VBS, walk through your building, and think through what needs to be sanitized and how. And restrooms are going to be a key place to keep clean and sanitized. You also need to walk through your building and your programming thinking about social distancing. We have had a history of registering children. They all come in, they all gather in the sanctuary, or they might gather in the narthex area or entryway in small groups. That doesn't promote social distancing. How do you do that? Is registration only for children that have families that have pre-registered? What about children from the community and neighborhoods that we've promoted VBS for or our children's program for, and they show up and want to participate? So you need to think through what you're going to do with that. How do you handle it? You need to think about the entrance and exit. Again, your church may have protocols that are put in place when you gather back for worship about how persons enter and how they exit. There has been conversation about families would enter staggeredly in one entrance, and row by row in worship, they exit out the door so that it keeps social distancing. Signage and communication is going to be very important. You go to any restaurant or store and you've got signs all over the place about how to keep and maintain social distancing. And you'll need to use your digital communication, your newsletters, your whatever means of communication you use to get that message out even before people arrive as to what to expect. And it's encouraged that you keep it very positive, not to be a list of do not, do not, do not, but how do you make it positive so that we emphasize again that we are keeping everyone safe. Think about your activities. Think about how do you maintain that social distancing in all the activities we have planned, from large group, small group gatherings, from classes to games, to science, to singing. And we need to watch CDC for singing. It's just emerged this week about whether singing is a even more dangerous way of spreading the virus, because particularly when you sing, you produce the little viruses and that can go out even further than 6 feet. So I'm beginning to see singers, or when you're singing, you're 12 feet apart. I'm beginning to see that you sing with mask on. I'm seeing that you don't sing at all. So we're going to have to watch CDC and the recommendations to see where that lands, what happens with that. And then how are you going to do restrooms? Do you need to block off every other stall? Do you need to rethink your safe sanctuary policies about how we have children in the restrooms? That it's, again, you can sit and start thinking through how your children and families interact in the building and begin to identify areas that you need to think about and ask about and come up with new ways of functioning and working together. And as we think about supplies, just if you've not been in touch with your curriculum publisher, most publishers that I have seen and researched are offering returns and refunds that are extended into September, October, some in September, some in October. So check when you can return and get refunds on curriculum. Most too are looking at extending their availability of curriculum into 2021 because they know that there are a lot of churches who are planning to use not even do VBS this year, or to do with something very drastically different from what a traditional VBS looks like, and will be holding off and using that curriculum next summer. Check into the publishing, into your publisher, curriculum publisher. They are presenting alternative ideas, and they are also looking at online possibilities. our warning with online possibilities is that the Camping Association, the National Camping Association, put out a survey, and I've seen some other surveys. Parents are, there were 75% of parents on the camping survey said, and this was national, it wasn't just Holston Conference, said that they did not want any more screen time for their children. The children had been bombarded with screen time for online classes, and parents who are still working at home remotely need to use their screens for work, and so the availability in there. So I would say don't depend on a full-blown online vacation Bible school. There are going to be still online opportunities out there, and you can make them known and available, and parents can use if and when they want to use them. But the publishing companies are making online possibilities available. We're going to be looking at some alternative ideas from the United Methodist Publishing House next week. I had been in conversation with one of their Vacation Bible School editors, and he will be a part of our conversation next week. And hopefully we'll have one of the other children's ministry editors online and can share what they are doing as far as even Sunday school curriculum and things like that. So check into the publisher's website for information and detailed information, but you will need to think through how you're going to use your curriculum. You'll need to think about what cleaning and hygiene supplies you have on hand or need, knowing that it's been very difficult to find cleaning hygiene items for our own houses. So thinking about disinfectant that's both EPA and FDA approved to kill the coronavirus specifically. To think about masks. Are you going to provide masks? Or are you going to ask families, children, to bring their own mask? What if somebody shows up and doesn't have a mask? It's a whole nother issue if somebody shows up and doesn't have a mask and doesn't want to wear a mask too. So, but think through that. Think through hand sanitizer. Are you going to ask children to carry hand sanitizer in their pockets? Or are you going to provide that? Are you going to have stations? Are you going to have bottles of hand sanitizer in every classroom? Think through what supplies you need, and I would start looking at where you can get those supplies. And as always, we are thinking about budget considerations. We know that in this time, offerings may or may not be coming in as planned, and that you need to think through what your budget is. You need to see if you're even going to have the amount of money that you had planned to have for your Vacation Bible School. But it's also even to be good stewards of the monies that are in your budget, and to think about what inexpensive alternatives you can do. If you're used to buying pre-made prep kits, it may be easier just to get the craft kits, buy bulk supplies, and to make your own kits instead of spending the money for pre-made kits. But sometimes I have found that the pre-made kits are cheaper than buying the bulk too. So you need to think about that, look into that. But what are some ways that you can foster a low budget Vacation Bible School or programming? Share resources. I know that you'll need to think about how you sanitize those resources, but if a church has decorations And you can even use this example beyond just this summer, but even into next year, because we're always going to be thinking about how we can do it low cost, if possible, to get with another church and order supplies together so that you share some of those resources, and that you're not buying everything for one church. Use donations with your thinking about decorating the Vacation Bible School. It's a good time to go through the list and see what persons and families might have in their homes or church members and ask for donations. And leverage technology. Our publishing houses, again, are putting out free online resources, particularly at this point in time. So if you're thinking about holding off and using the curriculum next year, it's a good time to go ahead and print off what's being offered free this summer. So look into that as well. That is the end of the presentation. Malia, have you started to get questions, or we are ready to open it up to questions?
I've had 2 questions so far that's came to me, but if anybody else has a question, you can send it to me privately, or you can put it in the group chat, and we'll be moderating questions because we do want to spend some time with question and answer. The first question that came to me is the 4 to 6 weeks for all children's ministry, or is it just for not having VBS 4 to 6 weeks after the church regathering in face-to-face?
No one has made that a stipulation, a hard, fast rule. That is just a suggestion. That the only thing I have read is not to open up immediately, even with the nursery. Mm-hmm. So the 4 to 6 weeks gives you an opportunity. Again, it's the number of hours. Instead of trying to do worship and Sunday school, which puts somebody there for 2 hours, it shortens it to 1 hour, 45 minutes to 1 hour. So that's part of it. And it gives you a chance for parents to get used to the new protocols that the churches have in place anyway. I'm thinking with Vacation Bible School, I cannot have a plan in place and implement it within 5 days anyway. So I'm thinking you're going to need the extra time just to even get volunteers in place and ready to go. And your church may not have all their protocols in place even today, and it changes. So I would expect it would change before you even move back into the church building. Mm-hmm. So my suggestion, based on talking to other children's ministry and what sounds feasible for me, is to think about not starting immediately the day you all move back into the church building. Give yourself some space and time. You may start a nursery a week or 2 weeks after that first Sunday back, but I would talk with your parents and with your pastor about not starting other children's programming till later. Mm-hmm. Give yourself some space and time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then as we're looking at volunteers, and I think we mentioned that some volunteers may not be comfortable or may not be able to help, just a reminder was sent in to make sure that safe sanctuary guidelines are still following, because, and so if you can just touch on that some, that reminder came in from another host and children's
member. Right.
And so continuing to hold with.
Yeah, I mean, all of this is in addition to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that kind of gets tricky.
Yeah.
We have a lot to deal with just without anything related to the virus. So,
Yes. Susan, it was asked if we can take down the presentation screen so that we can.
yes. How do I do that?
You go just at the top, it will be cancel screen share or stop screen share.
Okay. I lost in the middle of my presentation the screen share on my computer. And I had my other computer up and was using it.
Hey, there we go.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah.
So now at the top, I take it down.
No, I'm taking it down.
Okay, thank you.
I was able to stop it. So, and then Beth says, if the church is checking temps at the door, should the children's ministry check temperatures at classroom doors of kids, or hope that the first temp check took care of the children like it was supposed to happen?
I don't know what that's going to look like. I think that's, again, a conversation to have with your pastor, your trustees, your medical professionals there. I don't even know if churches are going to be asked to do temperature checks. So I think that is, you look at the CDC guidelines, you look at what guidelines are coming out from the state, your city, and as a church as a whole, determine that answer.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I have not encountered, the only place I have encountered a temperature check was I had a physical, and I had, when I went into the doctor's office, they checked my temperature. That I have not had temperature checks at stores, grocery stores, or other places. I even went to the drugstore one day and didn't even have a temperature check there. But my husband works retail, and they do a temperature check every time he shows up for work. So I don't know what the protocol is going to be.
Absolutely. Stephanie said that children can be carriers and have the virus without a temp or symptoms, but the temperature check is a good indicator as well as respiratory problems.
Right.
Any other questions or?
Beth, I would think that if you took the temperature at the point of arrival, that you wouldn't need to take it throughout the time. I was reading back through your question. Christy Alton said that she has alternative crafts that she's made for the Rocky Railway VBS, if you want to talk to Christy. Because that's an alternative way to use crafts. Any other questions you can actually ask or raise your hand and ask now that we've moved beyond the
yes, Stephanie put healthychildren.org is a good resource and has a COVID section. So if you didn't see that on the chat, that would be a good resource to check in to. And then so that's very good. Thank you, Stephanie, for that.
I unmuted for just a minute. So I work at Children's Hospital, and they have a COVID page, but that's the recommendation for a resource. It also has good handouts and good signage if you're needing that type of thing, or if you've got parents that are dealing with anxiety or developmental issues, there's things on that. It is a site run by pediatricians, but also to let you know, the American Academy of Pediatrics came out with their recommendations as far as reopening for other things beyond school. They're recommending things that pretty much that if we are gathering children, whether it's in churches or anything else, if we are gathering children, we need to follow the child care CDC guidelines and spacing kids apart, making sure they wear masks if they're over 2, checking temps because it's easily spread among children, and they are carriers without symptoms. So it's very easy for them to look fine, feel fine. The COVID patients that we have had at Children's, they seem fine. except for some coughing and having some struggles if they get too active. And they may not have a fever. The other thing that's coming out is there is a very serious heart condition that's becoming an afterthought of kids who have had COVID. It's just coming out this week. So I do think we need to be watching the news for the next few weeks. I know the pediatricians I'm talking with at Children's and the work things I'm getting are strongly recommending that if we do not have to gather children, to please do not do that for at least 4 to 6 weeks, if not longer, after we start opening up phase 2. I'll mute myself again.
Yeah,
Awesome. Thank
that's
you.
helpful. And we're not in phase 2, we're still in phase 1. And so phase 2 is even 25 or less people. Is that correct, Stephanie? I think.
Yes, and so that's what they're saying. They want phase 2 to have been opened up for about 4 to 6 weeks to see how larger gatherings are doing before we introduce that fact into children's. In particular, that serious condition is for children under 5. So that's my reservation. I will not be opening my nursery. And most of my parents, I've been doing some driveway visits with families just to take their pulse, see how things are going, dropping off packets of materials and such. None of them are planning to come back, probably until August. So that might be something before you invest a lot of money and resources and time and effort to take the pulse of your families, because most of them, they're wanting things to go back to school, hopefully in August, and they're not going to risk their kids in gatherings this summer. So.
Right. Stephanie, is the disease you're talking about that we're hearing, is that the one that's got the rash too?
Yes.
The children with rash and swelling.
So what happens is there is a condition called the Kawasaki syndrome, and it often happens when you get acute viruses and a viral reaction to children, and particularly under 5. It starts with some GI issues and a high fever, and then the skin starts peeling. But what it's doing that you don't see is it attacks the cardiac vessels. And these kids, even though it's the chance of morbidity and mortality is on the lower end, they have cardiac issues for the rest of their life. So it is a very serious illness, and they're just beginning to tap into this. There's still a lot of research going on, and that's why they're being very careful about us gathering children. So it's been decided. We met with our trustees and leadership 2 days ago, and I've made the call that we will not be opening children's ministries at the earliest August, and even that will be in spacing, social distancing and spacing.
So we just Google American Academy of Pediatrics.
I would think so. I think you could probably just do a Google search and do COVID and American Academy of Pediatrics, and you'll find it. And it's school recommendations, but the thing that we got through at Children's yesterday was that it's going to be applicable for most gatherings of children. And it sort of makes sense that, you know, if you've got a nursery or something or a little toddler place, they need to have their own designated space. Otherwise, after a child's left, you have to wipe that down, saturate it, and then it needs to air dry for 5 minutes before the next child comes in. And one other caveat, especially with hand sanitizer, that is toxic for children under 2. Hand washing, soap and water is much, much better than hand sanitizer. And if you do have to use hand sanitizer on them, you need to hold their little hands away until that air dries. If they put it in their mouth, it's toxic. If they absorb too much through their skin over repeated things, it become toxic levels. So their skin's much more permeable. So just be aware of that as you're going forward.
Stephanie, based on what you heard me say, is there any other thing I left out or any other caveat like you made about the hand sanitizer? I wasn't aware of that. That's helpful information.
Yeah, and you will find those things like on that healthykids.org. If you do some searching around, go into the COVID section, because it's a broad thing. It covers lots of things, and it's part of the American Academy of Pediatrics website. But if you click on that COVID section, you'll see, if you scroll down to the bottom, there's lots of other issues and lots of things you can look at. But using hand sanitizer, and I will tell you, soap and water for 20 seconds is 10 times better than any hand sanitizer to begin with. So it's really our best bet anyway. And it's much safer with our kids because all of these chemicals, that they are a toxic hazard that we have to be aware of. And we need to make sure they're air dried before any kid comes in contact with them, because they may not think anything about it and touch their eyes or touch their mouths or put their hands in their mouths and that sort of thing. Be aware too, because supplies are so low, that some of those products that you're seeing on Amazon may be coming from a country that may or may not have been FDA, EPA approved. And there again, might have chemicals in there that might be hazardous to children.
I ordered an oximeter. In fact, my sister is a nurse, and she ordered the oximeter for me online, and it came from either China or Japan. I'm not sure. But when I got it, everything was written in a different language. So I was going like, oh, wait a minute. And then I realized that a lot of it is coming from our Asian countries. So good warning there. Brittany had a alcoholic homeless man drinking sanitizer in a lobby at the church. That's not good. But I mean, I think that's where you have your trustees and your, you should have other people in the building who can handle that situation and confront the homeless man and get him the help that they need directly. Stephanie has put a website, healthychildren.org, in the chat. So check that out. So that's helpful. Always grateful to have somebody in the medical field.
I'll put the Children's Hospital website on there too. It's etch.com, and they have a COVID section if you want to have specifics for here in East Tennessee.
So I appreciate you being online with the, as I said, you need to make sure you're talking with somebody in the pediatric field in your community and or in your church, because they can provide more information than I can.
I think being an employee there and seeing what's going on, and we're anticipating a second wave. We really do think we've just sort of been blessed and lucky so far in this area that, I mean, I don't want to do anything at my church that might cause us to have an increase in the population, especially with our children.
Somebody said they're glad that we're going to have next week because they're thinking at this point you're needing to look at alternatives. I honestly agree. I don't think if you're planning to do a traditional VBS, if I was in your shoes, I would not be doing a traditional VBS. And even to think about a traditional VBS in the fall, at fall break, my hunch is people have been so tired of being cooped up that they're going to want to get out and do something other than VBS at fall break too. So I think we need to be shifting our thinking to something totally different.
And I think along with that, Susan, we're in that spot the last week and a half. But there's still partnerships that can be done along with other churches. So for us, like, it's going to look totally different more than likely. But we are partnering with another church and looking at if we do something that's a take home, at home, virtual, all those components with a lot of parent at home involvement or take different things. And we'll talk more about that next week. But be thinking about who you can brainstorm and partner with, because this is also, as Susan said, a great time to continue partnering. So even though you may not be sharing sets, you may not be sharing things that you have shared in the past, maybe churches can come together to do something and put something together. And I know that's the direction this past week that we've sort of decided to go on. So
I think also like remembering that, like, I'm trying to keep the focus of like the why of VBS and like, so not just saying we're not doing it, but like, why do we do it? And so being creative, like you mentioned, in our thoughts, which is, it's fun for some, people who like to get creative. This is an opportunity to really get your juices flowing and things like that. I typically don't sleep during those periods, but I think that I think this is a great opportunity. So that for us to pivot and not panic about it.
Absolutely. But looking at the why is important.
Any other questions or thoughts?
I had a question since partnerships had been brought up. I had asked, is there anyone else here from the Hiawassee district that would possibly be interested in a partnership? I would like to explore that.
Or what part of Hiawassee district are you in?
I'm in Cleveland.
You're in Cleveland, okay. Are you at First Cleveland?
No, I'm at Benton United Methodist.
Okay. You might talk with the district superintendent and see, or just call some of the area churches there in Cleveland and see what they're doing and what might, if they might be interested in partnering with you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I don't know anybody. Chrissy Gray said she's in Hiawassee. Where are you at, Chrissy?
I'm at Ottawa.
Yeah.
You're at Ottawa.
Put up my email if you want to email me.
Okay, thank you.
Cleveland and Ottawa will be fairly close, not necessarily to do things, but you could share ideas and resources.
Any other questions?
Just FYI, we have been meeting every Thursday here at 10 o'clock, usually just to share ideas and support one another. We will be providing more of a focused conversation next week with alternative VBS ideas. And I am working with publishers at the publishing house to look at fall curriculum. So we're hoping to have a focused conversation around fall curriculum ideas there. So we'll be getting information out again. If you want to put your name and email address, I can go back through the chat. Several of you, I do have your email, but several I don't. And we can add you to the network list. If you want to be added to the network list, we'll do that.
And can we send out the PowerPoint to that list, Susan?
Yes, I can get the email. Yeah, if you want the PowerPoint, make sure I have your name and email address. And what I'll do is also, we have set up a What's Next web page on the Holston.org website, and I'll send the PowerPoint to, we have been recording, so Malia, if you can send me the recording, I'll send it to Donna to post it up on the website.
Awesome.
Web page. We do appreciate everybody being a part of this conversation. Malia, I think we'll look toward ending it out unless somebody has something else.
Yep, I think that's great. So thank you, Susan, for presenting the information. And I would just encourage you to look at it for VBS, but also this is incredible information to look at for reopening when we're able to gather back in person. So I think it's a focus for a both and, not an either or. And just begin having those conversations, because the time will come. It may not be the timeline we would like, or it may not be immediate, but the time will come that we're able to regather in person. So use this as guidelines. There's also a PDF that we can probably put on the Holston Children's Ministry page of different questions to ask that goes along with the PowerPoint that you can send out to your teams and begin to have those conversations with your teams, and also the pastors, the staff, the trustees at your church, because we're all in this together. And if there's there's any way that Susan or I can support you or questions you have, please let us know. We want to partner with you together in this, and so we hope that you have a great day. Let us know if you have any other questions. If you just want to chat afterwards for a few minutes, Susan and I can be on to do that as well. So we look forward to seeing you next Thursday at 10 o'clock, the same link, and we'll be looking at summer alternatives, both at smaller churches, larger churches, as well as different other areas of the Methodist connection. So we look forward to next Thursday at 10 a.m.
Thank you.
Let us close with prayer. Loving and holy God, we're so grateful for the opportunity to be in ministry with children and families within our own congregations and communities. We're grateful for the wisdom that you guide us with. Continue to open our hearts and minds to hear others, to hear those that are in the medical field, those that are thinking about and creatively leading us and guiding us in ways to help us to keep children and families safe, as well as keeping ourselves and our families and our staff, volunteers safe. We're grateful for the opportunity to make sure that we use your wisdom in ways that are not harmful, in the ways that keep us all healthy and safe. As we move beyond this time into the days and weeks and even months ahead, walk with us, guide us, hold us in your love and care, instill us with your wisdom and your creativity as we think of new and awesome ways that we can stay in ministry and be in ministry with one another. For we know that the church has not left, that there are people and families out there looking for your message of hope, your message of comfort, your message of love in this time ahead and in these days that we face together. Go with us and bless us. In your holy name